Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar launch of the 2020 European e-commerce report. My name is Sara, and I am the chief researcher at RetailX, responsible for this report, for better or for worse. Hopefully you like it. Oh, I think it worked. Not yet. Okay. All right. Yeah, now I'm the organizer. Hopefully you can all see me and hear me. I expect my panelists to start flailing their arms if they can't hear me, so I can figure that out. We're all working from home. Okay, I'll keep it brief. I want to say thanks to our sponsors and partners. I wrote it down so I didn't forget. Of course, Ecommerce Europe, EuroCommerce, Ascendia, Channel Advisor, VTEX, and PFS. We've got three awesome panelists today. We've got Luca Cassetti, who is the director from Ecommerce Europe. We've got Jean-Albert, I'm going to butcher this last name, Nyssens, hopefully, who is the chief economist at EuroCommerce. And we've got Will Lockie of Georg Jensen, who is the global head of digital. So we're going to get started in a moment. I just want to do some housekeeping really quickly. So for timing, I'm going to do my best to keep this at 45 minutes, but it's me and I'm American from Michigan, so it'll probably be an hour. We are going to have some Q&A. If you have some questions, you can pop them in the questionnaire box. We've got lots of great people there to answer them, or you can also send me an email. There's a handout in the PDF section of this presentation. If you want to check it out, go for it. If you want to download it now. And there's also going to be a link for the recording, which we've recorded, which will be after. So if you have any questions, go for it. But in the meantime, let's get started. Hopefully I can share the correct screen with you. My panelists, I expect to tell me if this is, can everybody see my screen? Good, cool. All right, so this is, yes, our launch of the European report with our panelists. All right, I wanted to talk briefly about the agenda. We're going to do an introduction to the report. I'm going to cover that. I'm going to give you some of the key figures from the report, which is really important information and stuff that you only get on this webinar or if you buy the report or download it. Then we're going to have a bit of a conversation with Luca, Jean-Albert, and Will about their perspectives on the report, what their takeaways were, and how much they just absolutely loved it. And then we've got a couple key topics we're going to discuss. We'll get into that later, and then any questions and everything after that. So let's go for it. This is a bit of a snapshot of the report. There's about 176 more pages chock full of information like this, so I hope you get a chance to take a look at it. But let's just start off really quickly. In our European report, because of course we have to make tough decisions for which countries we're going to include, we included 34 different countries, not all of them in the EU. We expanded a bit to include the Eurozone. So we've got our regions there separated. In the report, they're separated out as such as well, so you can get a better understanding of how e-commerce looks in those regions. We have GDP, of course. We wanted to show you the size of the market, which Jean-Albert actually should probably talk more about because he knows more about that than me. But the population, of course, is important when we figure out how many people are shopping online. And what's really cool, and let's just move on to important e-commerce stuff, is that 87% of Europe is accessing the internet. It's not like 87% everywhere, but on average, it's 87%, which is really awesome. It's very high. It also shows that Europe is a great market to consider. Okay, this is a massive slide, but this is great for if you're downloading this. What we wanted to cover as well were infrastructure and logistics indices. Now, I'm not going to go through this line by line because I expect all of you to do that and then report back to me when I Q&A you on it. But what you can see actually is that European countries are ranking really actually in first place in many cases, and in many cases second, third, fourth, and fifth places in very important e-commerce indices. So we've got the logistics performance, and we've got ease of doing business, etc. You can check this out more in the report. But the idea here is that Europe is a highly digitalized and a connected part of the world where we all work together in a single market. And you can check that out as well in the report. All right, this is the money slide, I like to call it. This is the important one that everybody skips through the report to find. This is the total B2C e-commerce turnover and growth rate in Europe. For this, we work with all the national associations. In many cases, there are 2 of them in countries. We work with all of them to get this figure, basically. So this is of all the 34 countries, and we work with lots of e-commerce associations, thanks to them, really very much, to get this figure, which is that in 2019, we're expecting, no, we know that it was a 636 billion euros in e-commerce turnover. And we're actually expecting this year to see quite a high growth, I would say, with that, with COVID-19. Of course, we'll get into that later. On the, hopefully it's the right-hand side for you, you'll see two other charts here. We've got e-shoppers in Europe. It's a little bit small, but it's at 68% of our e-shoppers. So that means of that internet penetration that you just saw a minute ago, 87%, 68% of them are actually shopping online. So it's quite phenomenal. It's a really great market. And then for the e-GDP, this is actually, the definition here is that this is the percentage of GDP that is made up by this B2C e-commerce turnover. So we look at each of the countries and we try to tell you so that you can see what the market size is for that specific country. So here you have it. This is the money slide. All right, and then breaking it up into the regions that I showed you earlier, I wanted to cover internet use. Of course, e-shoppers, Western Europe and Northern Europe are by far leading whenever it comes to internet use. They're highly mature markets, very digitalized markets. But when it comes to e-shoppers, Western Europe is really leading the pack. And Western Europe has got countries like the United Kingdom, Germany, France, the Netherlands, which is very rainy today, unfortunately. So we've got some very nice mature markets in Western Europe. And then when it comes to B2C e-commerce turnover by region, and of course B2C, mind you, is business to consumer, just in case anybody was wondering what that was. So we're not looking at consumer to consumer or business to business, which some of those markets are really astonishingly huge. So when it comes to B2C e-commerce turnover, Western Europe is by far the largest region. It takes up 70% of the total B2C e-commerce turnover. However, we have some up and coming markets. We've got quite a bit of growth in Eastern Europe and in Central Europe. So I look forward to seeing those in the coming years. This is a big slide, I'm sorry, but in case you're really interested in seeing where your country falls or where you're interested in expanding into if you're a retailer, this is the great slide for that, actually. If you're interested in going to Switzerland, for example, you can see what the market size is, and this is in euros. We've converted most of the countries' currency into euros so that it's a bit more understandable for everybody. As you can see, the United Kingdom is by far the number one by quite a lot, actually. But France just hit over 100 billion last year, which is fantastic, and Germany is on its way to meet up. And then, of course, we've got some up-and-comers. But this does not tell you the whole story, because this is what the market looks like right now. But you can see from the growth rate here on this slide that the up-and-coming markets are actually in Eastern Europe. Romania, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, Latvia, Estonia, not all Eastern Europe, but they've got 25% plus growth rates. So we're seeing a lot more activity coming up. These countries have e-commerce associations as well who are lobbying heavily for good policy, but also to help retailers and consumers get online and shop online. And as you can see, of course, eGDP represents a bit more the market size. So United Kingdom is pretty high up there, almost at 8%, and Denmark as well is very high. And then really though, I wanted to also show you this because I think this is important to keep in mind when it comes to e-shoppers per country. So despite the fact that Romania is growing quite substantially, it's actually the number one when it comes to growth rate, we're still struggling there when it comes to e-shoppers. So it's fantastic that we have an e-commerce association there that is helping consumers to get online and helping to create better policy to do so. But again, it is up and coming. So these are some of the facts that you'll find in the report. I think that might be, oh, I'm not near the end, hold on. So we got the frequency of online purchases. This is also big. I'll try to go quickly through this so our speakers have more time to talk. We wanted to cover here as well which countries were purchasing more online. So we've got the frequency of purchasing in the last 3 months of 2019, 1 or 2 times, 3 to 5 times, 6 to 10 times. And the United Kingdom actually is shopping, the consumers in the UK are shopping online the most. So they are shopping 6 to 10 times in the last 3 months, more than any other country. It goes without saying, I suppose. But this is important information for if you're looking to expand into a different market that's not the United Kingdom or France or Germany, and you're thinking, where can I go that will suit my target audience? So this is also some information that you'll find in the report. We also wanted to cover cross-border shopping. You can see that Malta, it's kind of intuitive. Malta, Iceland, Luxembourg, these are countries that really, their e-commerce markets inside the country itself is not as, let's say, developed as some of the others. So they tend to shop cross-border more often than not. But this is also some good information for if you are a retailer in a given country, say that you're located in Spain and you want to expand to a different country and you want to see, are they likely to purchase from my store in Spain, or should I open up a shop in France, let's say? So this is a really good piece of information for you to have per country. And then also I wanted to include just some of the barriers to e-commerce. And I think both Luca and Jean-Albert can talk a bit more about this. Also Will, I think, from an industry perspective. Some of the biggest concerns that individuals have in the EU are around security. So it can be for payments, for downloading, for buying and ordering goods in general, whether they'll receive them. So these are some concerns that it's important for you to know as a retailer if you want to expand into a different country. Because mainly, if you know this, then you can try to assuage some of those fears by putting it on your website and saying, I understand, payments are a concern. We are vetted by Ecommerce Europe with the trust mark or with the trust mark of the local association. So there are some ways that you can mitigate that, and I'm sure Luca has some more to say about that. But yeah, just wanted to point that out. And I'm gonna keep it brief because I feel like our three panelists have way more important things to say than me. So next I will give it over to Luca. If you want to introduce your organization, that would probably be best because I don't do a great job of that. So I'll let you introduce Ecommerce Europe, your role, and I'll let you tell everybody why you absolutely love this report. Go.
Thank you very much, Sara. First of all, maybe I would like to start by thanking you, Sara, and the RetailX team for having prepared the extensive report. It's a pleasure really to see how many pages you managed to put together, and I would also like to thank EuroCommerce for supporting this initiative. It's much appreciated, of course. Just a little precision, I'm not anymore the director of Ecommerce Europe, I'm the Secretary General, so the slide is slightly outdated, but no worries. I became Secretary General 1 week ago, more or less, and Ecommerce Europe is basically the voice of the digital commerce sector in Europe. Through our 25 national e-commerce associations, we represent now more than 100,000 companies that are selling goods, but also services, not only goods, but also services online to consumers. The mission of Ecommerce Europe is pretty much straightforward, is to act at European level, to help the legislators create basically a better framework for digital commerce so that their business can grow further and they can expand cross-border. Just a couple of words on why we invested in this report and why it is important for us. Well, first of all, it is an important source of information for online merchants because they will get reliable and useful facts and figures about the European market, but not only the European market, also insights per country. And that's much helpful, especially in a cross-border expansion perspective, we think. So that's why we support this initiative. So that's the first target audience, I would say. And the second target audience is, of course, policymakers. So European and also national policymakers, because it's important to deliver them in-depth insights about how the e-commerce market is evolving in Europe. And because we also need, as advocate of the industry, reliable data to support our policy requests. That's basically it, I would say.
Cool. Good. That's a great introduction, I think. Okay, so from the report, now you've seen it. You're one of the special few who have seen the report. What would you say are some of the key insights, specifically from the report, that have stood out to you? And then, as a follow-up, what are some of the steps that Ecommerce Europe is considering, or how are they going to strategically plan with this in mind?
Yeah, I would like maybe to focus on three main topics, I would say. First of all, it's of course the elephant in the room, COVID-19, so the impact of COVID-19 on e-commerce. Secondly, the twin green and digital transition of commerce in general, and finally, the remaining regulatory barriers. So maybe I can go a little bit more in detail on these three. Yeah, perfect. So, well, starting from COVID-19, hot topic, of course. I think we can all agree on the fact that the impact of COVID-19 on e-commerce still has to be assessed, but I'm grateful to RetailX that they managed to already put some insights in the report. We can also agree, I think, on the fact that for sure 2020 is going to be a difficult year for commerce in general, I would say. And it is also true that e-commerce has taken a quite prominent role during the crisis while heavy lockdown measures were implemented in the various countries around the world. I have to say that e-commerce, internet in general, basically helped shops that were not online before survive, while consumers could continue access products safely from their homes. So that's the great advantage of e-commerce. And I also would like to point to the fact that I hear often that e-commerce is generally considered as the winner of the COVID-19 crisis, but I would say that the real situation is a bit more nuanced. For example, we have seen that some sectors during the crisis did see a growth in online sales. Take, for example, food or IT equipment that you need for teleworking, for example, or for entertaining your children if you have them at home. So for that, definitely a huge growth, but for other sectors, there was a huge decrease. Take, for example, services like online sales of tickets for events or tourism. Yeah, you cannot go anywhere with a global pandemic and with lockdown measures. So these sectors lost a lot. Same for other sectors, even though the loss was maybe lower. For example, for fashion, you're staying at home, you're not going out. It's quite obvious. We should also maybe take into account the fact that those retailers which already had an online, offline presence, they basically shifted their sales from offline to online because their physical shops were closed. So here I would more talk about a shift of sales. So it's a growth of sales of e-commerce, but it's more of a shift, I would say. And of course, with this increase in e-commerce demand, there were also some strains on the supply chain and delivery channels, which now seem pretty much solved. But yeah, that was a challenge also for the delivery partners to be able to operate in a safe environment. So while the effect of COVID-19 on e-commerce cannot be fully predicted, I would say at this point in time, I mean, the report shows that the European B2C e-commerce turnover is still forecasted to grow at around 13% for this year. So that's still good news, I would say. And maybe to conclude on COVID-19, for sure, the pandemic has brought an acceleration of the digital transformation, but not only for businesses, but also for consumers, I would say. It's obvious that businesses had to accelerate the development of omnichannel solutions like click and collect and drive and this kind of safe solutions. There was also an increased outreach that we have seen in some member states of local commerce that was before offline. They went online and now they suddenly can sell also to Belgium, for example, from France. So that's great to see. And I would say that in general, this global pandemic made consumers more digital savvy than before the lockdown because they had to learn how to deal with this. So the Corona crisis basically showed us that it is even more important now to facilitate the omnichannel transition, also from a policy perspective, because we need to help businesses sell more over the various channels, and we have to accommodate these new ways of consuming that were there before the pandemic, but now are even stronger, I would say. So now more than ever, I think that companies in Europe need the support of the European Union and the institutions to be able to compete on an increasingly competitive global market. So that would be my first point. I hope I'm not too long in my explanations. If that's the case, just let me know.
Go for it, Luca.
Then more shortly, the other 2 points. So the second one is about the twin green and digital transition. It's pretty much clear that in the current EU recovery plans, we can see a strong focus on this twin transition. And we do believe that e-commerce is an essential player of the digitalization of the European society. Because it has this capacity to make this transition more sustainable and green. It's pretty interesting to see in the report that in many countries, sustainable e-commerce has been already high on the agenda of governments, even before the pandemic. But not only of governments, also for associations, and more importantly, also for companies, because there are already sustainable solutions that are being developed by the e-commerce industry itself. I can maybe mention initiatives to reduce packaging waste or the size of packaging, or reducing air in packages and parcels to optimize delivery, optimization of last mile delivery, and why not also the use of green delivery vehicles or also bikes. We see that more and more here in Brussels, so it's good to see. It's a green way of delivering, so it's a very green way of doing commerce. And I think that the economic recovery post COVID-19 should then be both a digital and a green recovery, and that should be our focus and the focus of the European Union. Then finally, my third point, because I have to say something about regulatory barriers, because we still see regulatory barriers. We were seeing that before the COVID-19. We saw that during the COVID-19. The coronavirus crisis, I think, also strengthened the need to alleviate these unnecessary regulatory barriers for merchants that we still see in Europe. We still see a struggle to sell cross-border online, mostly I would say due to legal fragmentation or the fact that laws in Europe are not fully harmonized or only minimally harmonized. So in these times, more than ever, Ecommerce Europe will definitely continue advocating for simpler and more harmonized European rules, but also better enforcement of these rules, especially if we think about those players that are based outside the European Union, but that are active on our market. So they should also play by the same rules of those players that are established in the European Union. So in other words, we need not only, I would say, a more digital and greener Europe, but also a stronger Europe with a more efficient and competitive single market than ever. So that would be, yeah, my 3 points.
Great. I feel like we could probably end shortly after Jean-Albert and Will then, because I think you answered all the questions that I might have in the future. But yeah, just to echo what you're saying, I think it's definitely clear that the associations, they all collectively have said sustainability, COVID, competitive marketplace, these are all super important topics. And it's funny because, you know, you as Ecommerce Europe have this macro level perspective, but then retailers they can really actually tune into that and get some good information. So, okay, so let's go even more macro maybe, I don't know, up to Jean-Albert with from Chief Economist at EuroCommerce. Let me just move the slide here. Hopefully you can all see that. Okay, Jean-Albert, I'm gonna ask you maybe the same questions because I'm a little bit boring, I guess. Can you explain to the audience a bit about EuroCommerce and all the things retail-oriented in the world today in Europe?
Sure, and Luca has said many things already, so we're very much aligned. So as a reminder, EuroCommerce is well, representing the retail and wholesale sector at the European level. We have about 31 national associations from 31 countries, but we also have direct members, large retailers like Carrefour, Decathlon, IKEA, both in food and non-food, and even some pure play e-commerce players. But overall, our member base is actually largely both brick and mortar and e-commerce. So I'll take a bit of indeed a larger perspective. And as a reminder, well, the sector provides 1 in 7 jobs in Europe. And when we think about the crisis, obviously, we should think about that one as well. And so indeed, kind of, and it's been said already, we're obviously very enthusiastic about this report because e-commerce has proven so dramatically important during the crisis. And it's been accelerating incredibly, well, what's been growing already for many years. Now, I don't want to spoil the party, but still want to point to the extent of the crisis that we're facing. And as EuroCommerce, we've actually computed that specifically for non-food retailers, the lost sales for 2020 could be anywhere between 260 and 320 billion euro. And that is despite the somewhat buffering effect of e-commerce, frankly. And with that, we've also well engaged with the Commission on the recovery plans, and we're in the midst of doing that. Well, I'm sure you know this plan is all about digital greening and resilience. And well, clearly we've been able to put retail and wholesale on the map for the Commission, and we're actually today identified as one of the 14 ecosystems that are a priority for the recovery plan. So that's great news, but it also points to, well, how important this crisis has been. Obviously, there's categories that have been thriving, there's categories that have been largely suffering, and well, except the few categories like indeed home improvement or at-home cooking or IT, the webcams that we all have, or the home office. Actually, many categories have been suffering. And in the end, well, how this will play out will depend on how strongly consumers pick up confidence and go back to stores, frankly. Now, obviously, there's a big difference between food and non-food, goes without saying. Some stayed open, some didn't. In food retail, also, the increase towards e-commerce has been dramatically positive. We've seen growth numbers anywhere between 70 and 300%, 70 and 300% on a week-by-week basis, depending on the country. So incredible numbers, obviously starting from a much lower basis in food. But just to give you an example, if you look at France, the drive-in stores have been massively increasing as a channel. And only that shifted more than 1% market share to actually one of the players who is very, very strong in that particular drive sector. So you see how e-commerce can actually shift 1% of the French market towards a player thanks to a very strong drive presence. I won't mention the names, but I guess everyone knows who that player is. In non-food, and well, we'll hear more about that in a minute, but the picture is still pretty dark, right? Because I don't think that in most categories, e-commerce will actually make up, e-commerce growth will make up for the dramatic loss that we've had by stores being closed. And then from an economic perspective, I still want to highlight the profit perspective on this, which is actually not necessarily very positive, right? Because retailer margins are already pretty low. And we're talking about low single-digit margins, both in food and non-food. Many, specifically non-food players, were already pretty close to the cliff before COVID. And obviously, we see a number of them falling off today. Because let's not forget, when we shift sales from the store to online, actually a number of these sales are less profitable. It's very easy to understand. We have to pick up the goods ourselves. We have to transport them ourselves to the house of the consumer. So all in all, we still expect a pretty important drop in profitability levels, despite or the increase in e-commerce. So let me maybe pause here and see if you have other questions.
Yeah, no, that was good. It's a great jolt of reality, Jean-Albert. We all need that. No, I think it's good. But you remind us why omnichannel also is a very important topic of conversation, even in e-commerce. We have to consider that, especially right now. I did have one other question for you, and I'm gonna be brief on it. What would you say are the key topics or insights that stood out for you specifically from this report? I know Luca already highlighted COVID-19, and he talked a little bit about sustainability, which is also a big role for us. What do you see as the next steps or strategic planning in a way for EuroCommerce? Yeah, in light of COVID-19, sure, and also sustainability, and how do those things go hand in hand? Yeah.
Sure. Well, a couple of points. I think on the report itself, I mean, it is, as was said, hugely data rich. And to me, what it highlights is that there's no single Europe on e-commerce. Frankly, it's already the case for kind of offline or traditional retailers. I mean, there's huge variances also there. And kind of, while many of the retailers are actually big companies, they're often more multinational than actually truly global. I mean, there's obviously a few exceptions. But when we look at the report specifically, I mean, I was struck by the fact that indeed there's so huge variances, which means also that there is huge potential for growth. There's obviously the crisis accelerating, but there's a number of countries which obviously still are and will continue to accelerate, with the UK, as was clearly said, or Germany to some extent being, and some of the Nordics being ahead. But even a country like Italy, for example, which for that sake is actually pretty developed in retail, in terms of e-commerce itself, has strong potential to grow. And then maybe one other that I'd point to is this assessment you've made between, and this is not sales, but traffic between brands, marketplaces, and retailers. Also there, you see pretty huge variances in terms of the sheer importance that marketplaces are taking in terms of well, getting the consumers to the brands. Now, maybe one other thing to be a bit more optimistic than my first remarks is obviously, well, there's a lot of things that are happening, and this is all about kind of innovation and digitalizing at the highest speed today. So we do see new models emerging. I mean, many of the retailers, and I'm talking food here, are partnering with the delivery companies, the Deliveroo's or the Uber Eats of this world. Obviously, I also look at a lot at China as kind of the innovation hotspot, frankly, in retail, with social selling and these kind of elements. But also, digital is not only kind of the store, right? We also see huge digitalization in the back stores, in warehouses, I mean, talk pricing and promotions getting digitalized, and obviously kind of heavily data savvy. But also more mundane things like, well, we saw apps appearing on, avoiding queues in stores, or actually navigating your store more efficiently to spend less time in stores. So that also is very important, that innovation that's going on. And maybe the last point here is, let's not forget that 99% of the retailers in Europe are actually small and medium companies, which means they're smaller than 250 employees is the formal Eurostat definition. So these retailers will need to indeed kind of digitalize as well, and not only have a shop window kind of site, but also move towards a commercial site. And there's lots of different ways to do that, but that's also, I think, where we will need support from an investment perspective, from well, states and potentially the European Union to accelerate digitalization also of SMEs, and hope that they will not necessarily all end up on the big platforms that we all know. They will obviously capture market share, and well, you've seen Facebook and Shopify and those kind of platforms accelerating the digitalization of small and medium companies. So let's not forget those either. I mean, they represent 99% of the retailers in Europe.
Great, thank you for your insights on that. And that is a bit more positive. I like hearing that. Okay, thank you very much, Jean-Albert. Will, you have been sitting super patiently, and I know you probably have a lot of things actually. You're like, yes, I have, Sarah. I know you probably have a lot of things to say about what Luca and Jean-Albert have said, particularly from an industry retailer perspective. I mean, I don't want to confine you to a question, because you can definitely respond to some of the comments that they made as well from your experience. But maybe you can explain just a bit to everybody what Georg Jensen, I mean, I think we all know as consumers, but maybe you can explain the business a bit more, and then just take it away, whatever you want to say. So, floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, I will try and give you we've had an awesome macro perspective from Luca and Jean-Albert. That was amazing, and I'll try and give you a bit more micro perspective purely from the perspective of a small multinational, a Danish luxury design brand operating out of Copenhagen that is global. So I'll give you that perspective. So I'm one of the retailers that's been through it. I run the digital side of things for Georg Jensen globally. Yeah, we're a small Danish design brand with a heritage in fine silver. We sell jewellery and homeware. So these are the categories, a bit like what Jean-Albert was saying, non-food. But yeah, during the lockdown particularly, lots of people were buying nice things for their home and jewellery for their loved ones. And so we were one of the brands that really saw those big uplifts, really big uplifts in our e-commerce channels. But as Jean-Albert said, you know, I could not compensate for the losses in retail because we had to close all our stores. And that's probably a pretty similar story to lots of other people like me and lots of other brands and small retailers out there. We also operate in the US. Actually, our biggest market is APAC. So, you know, conversely for the focus of this report, but just to give you a perspective of where we operate. In Europe, Denmark and the UK are our biggest markets, and there's no surprise to me actually when I look through the report that those two markets index the highest for what was it, the e-shoppers. Denmark indexes the highest for sort of digitally mature. And I think those were real factors in our growth in the last 3 months. Interestingly, I mean, the hottest topic, of course, as both Luca and John Albert said, is COVID and the impact that it's had, particularly on us, because obviously we've been really focused on the impact on our business. Interestingly, the growth in some markets, UK, Sweden, the growth in e-commerce, actually we managed to offset our losses in retail, mainly because we have a very small retail footprint in those markets, but it's still quite an achievement. So there are, giving you some optimism here, there are some success stories out there basically around the growth. And interestingly, the other fact, kind of sort of interesting point is, you know, we've seen markets in APAC go through COVID, and they're obviously much more used to dealing with the SARS history there. So for instance, in Taiwan, that market of ours has been through COVID. They've come out the other side and retail's 25% down. So just as a kind of a sort of a benchmark for us planning going forwards, what is the impact on our retail? And you know, can e-commerce hope to catch up? No, but could we end the year flat? Could we come out of Q4 flat on the year? That would be a pretty good result, basically, flat versus last year, I mean. So that's a kind of a quick overview of Georg Jensen and what we've been through. Would you like me to comment a bit more on the report, or?
Yeah, sure. I would love to hear. Yeah, my other question for you was, when you looked at the reports, the result from the report, I mean, what were the factors that were the most important to you for success in a given country or territory? You said that you have some experience with that.
Yeah, I think there's a few things, right? There's the things the report provides is the macro view, right? Things like ease of doing business in a certain market, how mature it is, all of those things that we look at when we decide, should we open in a given market? Should I open an e-commerce platform or a web shop in that market? Should we take another route to that market, via marketplaces like John Albert was saying? And I think even though we're talking about e-commerce specific, for me it's kind of, there are other routes, and particularly marketplaces is super important, because you know what happens when Amazon opens in Sweden soon, this year, I don't know, later, or whenever, they probably will. It will really disrupt that the Northern Europe in your report, basically, in terms of retail, e-commerce, consumer behavior. All of a sudden consumers are going to be used to getting a delivery on a Sunday evening, you know, and that just doesn't really happen in kind of Northern Europe. So I think those things are super important to me. I think the other thing that I think a lot about is just what I call your total digital business. So as well as where we sell through e-commerce, as well as where we sell through marketplaces, we also sell to wholesale partners who sell online, who equally are seeing these big uplifts in traffic and interest in sales. So as a small business, how do we support those partners as well better to sort of digitally enable them? And then to your kind of last point, Sarah, I think the key thing for me that the report blindingly states up front, and which is obvious, but I think we can all sometimes be a bit guilty of forgetting, is there's no one size fits all with Europe. You have to look market by market. And a good example I'll give you is, which is very close to me, is you know, for example, in Denmark, talking about payment solutions, you know, most people use mobile pay, right? So it's basically mobile pay is connected to your bank, and that is basically how you shop online. But it's only in Denmark. And most people collect their orders that they buy online, they collect from a pickup point. Compare that to the UK market, right? Debit card or credit card is king, and everybody's used to getting home deliveries, yeah, and dealing with couriers and all that kind of stuff. So there's differences there in infrastructure, which the report highlights. There's differences in consumer behavior, and for brands and retailers wanting to grow or scale, you just have to take that into account.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear that you got that also from the report, because I've written down now, I think 2 of you at this point have said no single Europe for e-commerce, and there's no one size fits all. And those are takeaways that I just always try to tell people. And actually, okay, I'm going to skip to the next little slide here. I want to just go through some questions that I have, and this is hardball. I don't know if it's a hardball, maybe, but not from me, maybe. But I have two questions. Oh, I have one question that I think both Luca and Will, Jean-Albert, you can of course have an opinion on it. But I think first I'll ask Luca this one question, and hopefully this makes sense. I wrote it down as you were speaking. In the report, we actually include an interview with Daniel Bennett from CoreSearch, which is a brand protection agency based out of the Netherlands here. Well, I think it's also UK. I'm not sure. In any case, it's quite an interesting topic now to consider, which is brand protection and how do you ensure that your brand is protected, especially within Europe, because we have a lot of outside influences as well. And so, Luca, I'm curious to know, when you pair up the regulation of brand protection and also with COVID-19 especially, we've seen some fake products, so we've seen some counterfeit goods being sold. What can we do in Europe to protect this from happening? And that's for you, Luca. And then afterward, I'm going to ask you, Will, how does Georg Jensen also protect its brand in this highly globalized world? So, Luca, maybe you first.
Yeah. I mean, I cannot speak on behalf of the brands, of course, because we do not represent brands, but we do sell products that are branded, of course. Yeah, indeed, what happened during the COVID-19 is that, yeah, unfortunately, there were some cases of fake products, fake masks being sold online. But the good thing is that e-commerce managed to respond quite well to this, especially from the side of platforms, which cooperated quite a lot with the European Commission on this side, to remove from their list these kind of products that were put on by sellers that were not fair at all, especially in a global pandemic situation. So there is a lot the industry can do already, of course, and then there is a lot that the market surveillance authorities can do as well, because they should also have a role in making sure that the products that are entering into Europe are safe for European consumers. If we are talking about a EU, non-EU framework, of course. So yeah, then you have also other initiatives like trust marks that can help in that sense. You mentioned it before. Not our trust mark specifically. Our trust mark is covering something else, not specifically the brand. It's covering the transaction because we are an e-commerce association. But yeah, definitely trust marks can also be of help, I would say, as part of the industry initiatives.
Great. And Will,
I hope it answers.
Yeah, that was great. Actually, it's good. I think Daniel goes into more of it in the interview as well, but it's good to sort of talk about it from a macro level as well. But Will, maybe you can give some opinions on brand protection in Europe as well.
Yeah, just briefly. I'll give you a slightly different perspective because we don't have a big counterfeiting issue. Okay, so when I think of brand protection, so we don't really have that issue. Well, actually, what we do have is, from a brand point of view, there's a thing about retaining brand equity. Okay, and that comes down to, literally who's discounting your product, basically. And when we think about Europe and when you think about the world or globally, protecting your brand in that sense, and particularly when you're a luxury brand, yeah. So the idea of equity and value to the consumer is super important, and the way that we do that is basically by managing our channels, our routes to markets, where we sell, who sells it, very closely. It's very simple stuff, but it's just how we do it. And obviously, when we're entering a new market, we have to think very carefully about what that route is. If it's by a marketplace, okay, is that a good fit? Would they discount the products and so on? So we have to be quite careful. So that's very unique to the Georg Jensen brand there.
Okay, cool, good. That's a good. It's also interesting, I think, for retailers to understand that brands as well. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question, Jean-Albert, as well, so you're not feeling left out. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll try to be quick. I'm curious about the sustainability discussion. So in our report, we cover, I think, 24 or 27 something interviews with country e-commerce associations, and every one of them I asked, what's the situation with sustainability? And so you see this difference between in opinions of consumers for whether or not e-commerce is more sustainable or brick and mortar retail is more sustainable. There's this massive conversation, and I'm hoping you can give us a positive perspective only on this. Tell us all.
Well, I wouldn't want to compare both of them because I think increasingly that split between e-commerce and offline, frankly, is getting blurred. I mean, sustainability is obviously a huge topic. It's a huge topic in terms of, well, it was mentioned, kind of waste management. It's a huge topic in terms of fleets. It's a huge topic in terms of digitalizing the store. And so again, if you go back to the agenda of the Commission, which is kind of digital, green, and resilience, we are going through an exercise of thinking, well, hey, what are the investments required in retail in general to increase resilience, to increase the speed of digitalization, and to increase greening? And you know what? A number of the investments are tick the box on a few of them, right? So take, for example, I mean, we haven't explored this one into full depth yet, but one of the visions could be, imagine that all the rooftops of all stores, of all retailers in Europe would be covered with solar panels. How many thousands of square meters of solar panels this would be? And obviously, well, that would increase sustainability and greening a lot. So you could argue this would actually increase resilience as well, because the store could function on its own. That's one example. But there's many of those, right? And so, I mean, if you think about the number of trucks that are on the roads because of retail, it's a huge number, right? So greening of trucks, kind of hydrogen or electric trucks, if ever they come to that technology level, is obviously very important. And these are the kind of platforms where we believe kind of collective investments will be required, because one company on its own, well, could, but frankly, it's very capital intensive to develop those ideas. So those are examples of where we believe the sector could frankly go ahead. But that being said, a lot has been done already, right? If you think about just plastic in retail has been massively reduced over the last years. Obviously, with COVID, we do see more packaging because actually consumers want to be reassured about the fact that products have not been touched by others. But so that we're very closely watching, and it's obviously not only plastic, it can also be other forms of packaging. But so those topics are remain very high on the agenda, and frankly, with the Commission putting this additional spotlight on greening, it will, I think, only increase.
Yeah, it definitely seems to set Europe aside when it comes to the push towards having a more sustainable market. Okay.
Yeah, but maybe it's obviously what the Commission, but I think the retailers and actually the consumer products companies are taking the lead on this, right? I mean, we are as an organization very focused. I mean, the Consumer Goods Forum, which groups both FMCG and retailers, is very much focused on this. I think this is just there to stay, and I think many top leaders in retail are very aware. And again, I won't mention some companies, but there's a huge furniture company for which sustainability is also very high on the agenda, and who've committed to kind of carbon neutrality, for example. So there's many of those examples, and it's really, I think, the top leadership of these companies kind of taking the lead on a number of these topics.
Yeah, and it really, it's funny because we have Will here, and of course, being, you know, as a Danish company, you see in the Nordics that this subject is really, really important. It's at top of mind for Swedish, Norwegian, Danish consumers from the associations. I mean, I would love it if you would comment on that, Will. I also have one other question for you from the audience, actually. This is a pretty good one. From Misham Pabari, hopefully I said that correctly. You mentioned behavioral changes from consumers are expected to stick in terms of the shift to online. So we've all kind of talked about that, which is especially the elderly population, I think we're seeing they are more likely to shop online. What do you believe to be the most important thing to consider as a brand or retailer that is new to online during this time? And I was thinking of what you said of total digital business. So maybe you can weave sustainability into that answer?
Yeah, well, actually, no, I'm going to split it into two because I can't. So, I mean, I'll answer that first question. So, I mean, I'll take a simple example. If I were entering the market and if I were launching my e-commerce business or whatever, I actually would just make sure I've got a really good online shopping experience. I would really focus on delivering the basic of shopping in that given market. So whatever that market is, and I'm sure you can look in the report to tell you what some of those things that you need to do are. but it literally comes down to that. That's always the number one thing I think of is our shopping experience in that market. Have I got the right payment types? Is the delivery okay? All of those basic things that consumers expect to do, and that is basically what's going to be number one. It sounds very simple, but you know that's what successful businesses do. They focus on giving a really good shopping experience. Then as to sustainability, I couldn't weave that in, but I think what I would do is listening to what Jean-Albert said is totally right. It's top of mind for consumers, and what actually I think COVID has done is really accelerate that a little bit, basically, because more people are now thinking, how's a way to say it, they're shopping mindfully. Okay, so when I buy a product, I think people are now making a call on, you know, how long is it going to last? Is it recyclable? All of those things that come into the sustainability. And I think there's definitely a growing trend amongst consumers for that kind of mindful shopping rather than sort of throwaway culture.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you on that. Okay, I know that I'm going to get yelled at by everybody watching and on the back of my team and you guys if I keep going. I just have one final request, is that you have like 1 minute top to give us, we're all looking for some kind of positivity and some hope for what resilience we can look for in the European market and in the world. Can you just, each of you, I'll start with Luca and then we'll go to Jean-Albert and then Will, you can finish it up from, you know, we'll start from that perspective. Can you just give me a minute of something to look forward to, something that you think is positive that can come from this experience that we're all collectively traumatized by? I think we should end it at that, and I'll say thanks afterward, but I'll start with you, Luca.
Yeah, I think I already mentioned it before, so I'm gonna maybe repeat it. So for me, something good that can come out of this this COVID-19 crisis is the the fact that the digital transformation will be accelerated. So that's something that we are advocating for, even before the COVID, of course. And what we see is that, you know, sometimes the rules that are made in Brussels are still distinguishing between online and offline sales, while at the end it should be just sales. So the consumer doesn't care if he or she is buying online or offline. The consumer just wants to buy, I would say. And the consumer would like to do that in all the possible channels available. For example, maybe ordering something online, and instead of going to the post office, you can maybe bring it back to a shop, a physical shop, exchange it with something else in case it doesn't fit, if it's clothing or whatever. So I think that we will see more innovation, more digitalization, and probably at a faster pace than what it was before. And that's something good, I would say, that came out from this situation. And more green, sorry, more green, very important.
And Jean-Albert, your turn. You're in the hot seat.
I'll give you two. I'll first echo Luca on innovation. Clearly, I think the pace today of innovation has just accelerated tremendously, and I think quite a few new business models, new ideas, kind of will accelerate. I think the second one, a bit more, comes from a different angle. I think with the crisis, we've all got to look at people working in retail in a different way, and I'm thinking mainly, well, food retail. I mean, the thousands of people that are working in the warehouses, in the supply chain, in the stores to feed us every day. We tend to forget, and these are not always very well-paid jobs. So obviously we have the people working in hospitals, but the other line of defense is actually those people working day in, day out to actually get our stuff on the shelves. And when we see empty shelves, and well, we've seen quite a few empty shelves over the last months, we suddenly realize that these products don't come there automatically, right? There's thousands of people, actually 29 million in retail and wholesale in Europe, working to actually get the products there. So I think the other positive thing aside from innovation is respect for people and all the different jobs that are in retail that actually get this done.
Great perspective. I like it. Will, your turn.
Yep. I mean, I think to kind of sum that up, I think from a customer perspective, the things that Luca and John Albert have just kind of said, it's gonna one positive thing. For sure, customers are gonna have a different shopping experience. Okay, it's more mission based and so on. But I think the innovation, the respect for the supply chain, all of that stuff will come together for a better customer experience, because ultimately there's many businesses out there right now just really looking at their business model going, what do we do about this? What do we do about this? And at the end of the day, if they're not serving the customer well, yeah, that's the thing that's going to drive the growth. So a better customer experience.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. And I think one positive is that hopefully none of us will have to worry about buying toilet paper anymore. I don't know. That will be one positive, I think, for me. Okay, great. I have to shamelessly plug the report. If you want to buy it, if you want to download it, however you want to get it, just not illegally, you can access it. I put the link here for everybody. This absolutely could not be done, and also I could not buy the groceries that Jean Albert is talking about if we didn't have awesome sponsors like Ecommerce Europe, EuroCommerce, Ascendia, Channel Advisor, VTEX, PFS. I feel like I'm on a podcast. So I'm shamelessly plugging that. I really hope everybody gets a chance to read it, download it. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question here that you want to know from either myself, Will, Jean Albert, or Luca, you can always send it to me, and then I can forward it to whoever needs it. I'm pretty sure they'll be happy. I'm saying that you will answer for them. And I hope that you enjoy it. And thanks so much to you guys for joining us, Luca, Jean Albert, Will. Thank you for coming on here. I know it's a weird time with COVID, but we appreciate it. And I'm gonna awkwardly try to end this webinar and hope that you guys all had a great time.
Thank you very much, Sara, for organizing.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you to everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye.